Good morning and welcome to the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Friday the 30th of 2020, of October 2020. I am today going to discuss with you a blog post that I'm in the process of writing. The blog post is called Media and Social Media, and it's a religion and politics topic, obviously. And I just wanted to kind of go ahead and begin with a sort of a disclaimer. I want you to know, for those of you that are not already aware, I am a right-leaning individual. Now, I consider myself centrist right, and I'm centrist right because, in my opinion, right-leaning people, far right-leaning people, are people who are all but anarchistic in nature. And the result is communism I consider to be a right-leaning perspective. It is right-leaning in nature, okay? Because ultimately what's supposed to happen in communism, in my understanding, is you're supposed to get to a point where people know who they're supposed to be, and they're supposed to basically govern themselves for the most part. Any real government that occurs is on a very small scale, if it occurs at all, and for the most part it's just assumed that it's not going to be necessary. Socialism, on the other hand, and that includes Nazism, not National Socialism, are very much left-leaning political ideologies, in my view, because they insist on a great deal of control over a state, right? I am moderate right-leaning because I believe in a national government, an overarching national government that has a very, very limited set of powers and possible things that it can do. And then I want for that government to generally speaking, limit itself to that set of things and not do very much of anything more. Then I would like to see smaller governments at various levels that do just the absolute maximum that they have to keep the peace and make sure that people are able to interact on a moderately civilized level. I don't even expect them to be to cause people to be really civilized. Now, all of this matters because it plays into, or it's sort of how you look at it, but all of it matters because the media will tend to have a bias in one direction or another, and that's whether you're talking about media or social media at the current moment, right? The reality is that various media outlets, I'm going to adjust the camera just a little bit here, various media outlets have biases towards given directions, and I don't think anybody should expect anything different. There used to be this viewpoint that said that media was unbiased. I don't believe that for a second. I've not believed it for a very, very long time. And to be quite frank with you, even people like Walter Cronkite, who people took to be unbiased, I don't believe ever were. He had a liberal bias, in my personal opinion. Granted, it was a minor liberal bias. Nonetheless, he had a bias, and that meant what he covered and how he covered it would have been different than somebody who had a much more rightist perspective. Now, sadly, these days, Mr. Cronkite would be looked at as more rightist than leftist, even though, as I say, he had, in my opinion, a leftist bias. But the point is, the media, in many people's minds, is unbiased, and that's just simply not true. And trust me when I tell you, I am not giving right-wing media a pass in this regard. They, like everyone else, have a bias in a particular direction, and that bias is in the direction of the right for the right-wingers, right? And they tend to be even more editorial, if it's possible for them to be so, often than the left wing does. That's not really true because the left wing editorializes in what they consider to be news. In many right-leaning entities, they just don't really have a news thing, or if they do, it's somebody like Fox, where you know that they're going to report things from a right-leaning perspective. They're just going to. And not only do I not have a problem with that, but I'm glad to know the bias of Fox, just as I am about, for CNN and so forth, whether or not either of them admits their bias. And with regard to people like Dan Bongino and Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and, so many others, and people on the left as well, right? I'd have to look to find who I'm talking about, Rachel Maddow and various others. They too have biases, and that's to be expected. With editorial people, it's obviously to be expected. The difference with social media is that social media entities, companies, were intended to be platform-based. They were intended to make it so that people could say their piece without any concern over whether what they had to say was right-leaning or left-leaning. Okay? That's what they were intended to be. The sad reality is, with the majority of news media outlets in the modern day, they are not, social media outlets in the modern day. Let's make sure we're talking about the right thing. The sad reality is, with the majority of social media outlets in the modern day, they are left-leaning. There are a few who the philosophy of the owners is right-leaning. All right, but their intent, if they're to be believed, is to give you the right to say whatever you want to say, whether or not they consider it repugnant, which is my attitude. My attitude is, look, speak your mind. Speak your mind. If it's repugnant to me, it's repugnant. I'll get over it. Okay? I don't want people saying obscene things. I don't want people presenting pornography on standard social media and so forth. Not that I'm saying they can't do that. I just would prefer that they didn't do that, and I probably won't support people who do it. People, individuals, not platforms. People, individuals, companies that are using those platforms, I will typically not support them if they do obscene things on, or things that I count unreasonable on. That doesn't mean they can't do them. Mind you, I'm not saying that they can't. My point, though, is that those platforms at this point in time are banning, and they're censoring, and they're fact-checking and doing various things to various people, and they're definitely, without question or doubt, doing things that are unequal in their application to those individuals. That's just reality. And that, in my mind, wouldn't be a problem if it were not for the fact that they're protected by certain laws to make it so that they're not liable for their content. The very point of their existence is to make it so that they're liable for their content. And look, here's the thing. I think it's even sort of reasonable, say, for example, like Twitter, just as an example, for them to say, but we intend to allow only this type of content. And if they make that clear, then others will know I really don't have a place here. I don't agree with people doing that. I would much prefer that what they do is be an open platform for people's decisions and ideas. But in the same way that, say, for example, LinkedIn is really more about business-related things than just about anything else, Twitter has the right to narrow what they believe is reasonable content for their site. I don't expect eBay to embrace social content, and I recognize they're not social media. I get that. But my point is they have a very specific purpose for existence. And if Twitter wants to take that perspective, in my mind, they have every right to do that. But they're not saying that. Facebook is not saying that. Twitter is not saying that. And the result of this is that the entities in question should be willing to be unbiased in what they allow on their platforms. Right? That's a really simple thing. And it's pretty obvious at this moment based on particularly the actions of Twitter and Facebook with regard to certain things that have been recently uncovered surrounding presidential election related things, that they're not unbiased. They are not. And I disagree with the person who says that more things should be taken down. No, in fact, what I want is to decide for myself what's correct and incorrect. And that's a very important consideration, right? When you see something that says Jennifer Lopez had a baby and the daddy is a Martian, you probably ought to be thinking that that's a questionable headline. I'm just saying, you probably ought to think that, right? And if you really, really must do so for something like that, okay, go and research it. Use DuckDuckGo, use Google, whatever. Go and research it. Find out whether or not there's any validity to what's being said. I will warn you to watch out for certain fact-checking entities. I don't use Snopes anymore, and there's a lot of good reason for that, in my opinion. Okay, I'm coming to the point where I need to wrap up for the day, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here's my thing. Media shouldn't be biased. It is. Get used to it. Be ready to fact-check things, no matter where they come from, left or right. Mainstream media or podunk outlet, be ready to fact check everything. Social media is protected, literally protected by laws, and should be unbiased unless it presents a particular charter that says that there's a bias so that people are aware that it's there. I think they can do that. I think it's reasonable. I would not probably support it in general if they did. All right, today, as I've said, is Friday the 30th of October of 2020. Tomorrow will be Saturday the 31st, I think it is, of 2020. Let's see if I can get the dates right. Thank you for everyone joining me on Rumble. Thank you for all of those folks joining me on YouTube and the ones who are listening on the podcast. I appreciate everybody who gives me any kind of support. I think probably I'll be able to do something again tomorrow. That would be October the 31st of 2020. So tune in again tomorrow, and hopefully we'll see you then. It's looking like a beautiful day today, and things are looking up a little bit for your host, and that's kind of a good thing, I hope. Again, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on the 31st of October 2020. Today is Friday. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for checking out this video. Remember that you can like it on YouTube, and you can give it a rumble on Rumble if you want to do that. I have channels on both YouTube and Rumble. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels. You can subscribe to either one of those if you want to do so. Remember, if you subscribe on YouTube, you probably want to click the notification bell in order to be notified of new content. If you want to see more from me, you can check me out on my blog. That's blogs.kpschubert.com, blogs.kpschubert.com. You can also see my Facebook page. That is Kurt's Religion and Politics on Facebook. You can check out my Twitter, Parler and Minds.com accounts. My handle on all three of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. You can check out my podcast. The podcast is at podcasts.kpschubert.com. That's podcast.kpschubert.com. And finally, you can check me out on Patreon. And if you want to support me, that's probably one of the better places that you can do that. I am Kurt's Religion and Politics there. Thanks again for checking out this video, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.